Um, Carmen, I think you need to give me some permissions to actually show my screen.
You already have. Okay.
Yeah, grand, perfect. Okay, can you see my screen? Oh, good, grand, thank you. Yeah, well, Carmen, thank you so much for that introduction. And hello, everybody. Yes, my name is Mafe. Before we get started, just very, very quickly, probably she mentioned this already to you, but if you haven't already, sign up to a Flourish account. You need to just go to flourish.studio. It's a very simple process. We're going to be using this for the session. So before any introductions, I just wanted to make sure that all of you have access to Flourish, because otherwise the practical part of the session might not be as interesting to you. So while I'm explaining and like doing the presentation bit, sign up to an account, and then we'll get started. But yeah, my name is Mafe. I'm a content specialist and database specialist at Flourish. We've been recently acquired by Canva. You might be familiar with Canva from like doing presentations or social media assets. I know I used it a lot when I was in uni, so you're probably using it as well. And I thought it would be a nice thing to quickly introduce myself and tell you what are some of the things that I do here in Flourish. Basically, my work is finding and analyzing data about varied topics, visualizing data to show insights and to communicate with different audiences. I also tell stories through data visualization. So I write blogs and articles on very different topics. And I also write about data visualization. So theory, practice, how to become a better chart maker, and try to communicate this to broad audiences to make sure that people become more data literate. So today, for this session, I'm going to be focusing specifically on political data, what it means, what it is. I'm going to give you a quick introduction to Flourish. So how can Flourish help you visualize any type of data, not just political? What are some resources to help you get started? Some examples with Flourish specifically for political data. And then we'll have the hands-on workshop or the exercise that I prepare for you. So, needless to say, if you have any questions at any point, feel free to like interrupt me, Carmen, if anybody like raises a hand or something. I might not be able to see everybody because the screen is quite small, but if there are any questions around the room, I'm happy to stop the presentation and just address those. So feel free to stop me at any time. So let's get started. And before doing anything, I want to ask you guys a question, which is, what is data? If I can get a quick definition or impressions as to what is data. Oh, sorry, I can't hear very well. Karen, can you will translate, but just speak higher, louder.
Information.
Yeah, grand. Any other takers? Information is a really great guess. It's a bit of a trick question. Oh, grand.
I suppose it's information, like the translation of that information into numbers and statistics.
Okay, great. Those are very accurate descriptions of what data is, but really the point I'm trying to make here is that data is everything, right? Nowadays, anything and everything can be data. If it can be measured, it can be visualized. And that's why all the things that I'm going to be covering today are relevant, not only for politics, not only for discourse, but for virtually anything, right? So when we think about data, we may think about numbers, statistics, spreadsheets, but really anything can be data or can be a data source. Like we have a spreadsheet here, which is how it might be super familiar to seeing data. But if you write notes in a book, if you tab a book and categorize it, that is data as well. That's something you can count, measure, and potentially visualize. The pictures in your phone, this is a timeline visualization showcasing different categories of pictures in one of my colleagues' phone. This is, I think, a visualization of talks or like interactions for other people. This is going to different restaurants in New York, and these are different meals in different books across literature. So my point here is that we live in such a datafied society and such a datafied world that anything that we consume, produce, or do, if it can be measured, eventually it can be collected, becomes data, and it can be visualized. So a few requirements for data, especially if you're going to be working with the data, is that it needs to be reliable. So you need to trust the source. And most importantly, can other people trust it as well? Like, what's the authority that your data carries for other people to care about it and for other people to actually listen to it, right? Listen to what you have to say. Then it has to be sourced. If you find it somewhere else from like a third party, if you collect it from somewhere, is it an authoritative source? Is it the Department of Statistics? Is it Twitter? Did you collect it yourself? How did you do it? Make sure you have a fair system. Make sure you make sure that you're communicating all the steps to your audience, and make sure that your data is always traceable. You're always able to tell where it comes from. This is super important. And then data must be unbiased. So we are very, very used to think that data is objective, that is a harsh truth, when in reality, data is collected by people, data is wrangled by people, data is manipulated by humans. So we infuse our own prejudices into the data we work with. So we need to be very careful whenever we are analyzing or even just looking at other person's data, that there's always going to be some sort of human aspect to it, some sort of bias. And we need to try and remove ourselves from it and be as fair as we can. And this is all very, very similar to any principles in like communication or journalism. We need to be fair, we need to be unbiased, and we need to quote our sources. So I'm sure these are all things that are very familiar to you at this point in your majors. But going into the topic, political data is simply data that relates to the political sphere. So policy, public opinion, elections. I would even go further and say that economics, demographics, anything that relates or relates to the public aspect of human beings can be considered political data. In the end, like, politics is really embedded in everything we do. So anything that relates to that in a hard sense can be classified as political data, at least in my opinion. This might be controversial for different authors. And political data is very interesting because it can visualize, or it can represent or help you understand events in the past. You can showcase previous elections. You can analyze historical data, census data, anything that helps you understand why something was in a specific way in the past. It can help you understand the present because you can visualize or analyze active electoral cycles, surveys, indices, anything that's like an index for happiness, an index for democracy or freedom of access of information. Or it can help you visualize and understand the future through polls, predictions and models, predictions as to who's going to win a race, how is a state going to flip in the midterm elections in the US, all of these things. Data can help us see into this three moments in time, rather. These are just some examples of current things that are right now happening. I mean, yes, given these are all three about the US midterms, but because they're happening in a couple of weeks' time, I thought it was like a relevant example. But you can see here, this is from 538, and this is just an overall, like, a really good resource to understanding polling, understanding how they collect their data for like doing predictions in electoral cycles. Again, specifically, this is for the midterms in the US. This is a really good example to understand how this data and how like these visualizations can help you make decisions, can help you understand your context better, can help you see what's happening around you in a much more deep way. And 538 overall is a really good resource if you're interested in politics, if you're interested in sports. They specialize in a lot of data-driven coverage. Again, they do predictions. They're very famous for their polling in the presidential elections in the US, and they have incredible articles. The Economist as well, they have been doing incredible coverage for the midterms. And again, all data-driven, all very visual, because it's a really good way to communicate with your audience. Very simple as well. People can quickly understand what are some of the trends that are happening in this current election, who's expected to win in the midterms. And yeah, these are just really good examples. And then we have the Pew Research Center. So I wanted to get away from the media a little bit and go maybe into think tanks and other type of organizations. So they do a lot of surveys and polling to understand how people are feeling about certain aspects. So before I was mentioning predictions into who's going to win the race, but here they were gathering information about how people are feeling about things that affect them day to day that are going to affect the election overall. So how people are feeling about their consumer price index, whether they can access certain goods or not, how are they feeling about security, how are they feeling about migration. So if you really dig deeper into this type of data and this type of topics, you will realize that those are things that you may not think are related to politics. You may think that, you know, the cost of living crisis or access to energy or access to food is not necessarily politically driven, but in the end, it can all be put under the same umbrella of visualizing political data. So going back, now, if you gather all of this data, and there are a lot of data sources out in the world on politics, on economics, education, a lot of things. If you gather all of this information, but your data looks like this, how are you going to engage with your audience? How are you going to communicate what you're learning and what you're gathering from all of this information? So this is where tools like Flourish come in. And we at Flourish offer dozens of freely available pre-populated templates for anybody to get started and produce interactive charts and interactive content. As of today, we are the biggest data visualization tool in the world. Since launching, we have gathered more than 1 million users who created over 10 million visualizations, amassing more than 26.5 billion views. And this number is so massive because a lot of newsrooms use Flourish, and obviously newsrooms give a lot, like bring a lot of traction, bring a lot of traffic. So our charts end up being exposed to many across the world. And this is amazing because it means that with our tool, we can help communicate very important matters on all aspects of life. And we really democratize the access of these tools that are data visualizations to everybody. Literally anybody can create a chart, and you're going to, you know, be a part of that cohort today by the end of the session, hopefully. Now, we're a team of around 35 people here based in London, and we are divided in different departments. I'm not going to go into much detail into this. We're a wonderful team, and yeah, it's incredible to be a part of it. But basically, all of us wear different skill sets, enable the world to create beautiful graphics and interactive stories without coding, meaning that we are lowering the entry barrier and making sure that anybody can get started and creating these beautiful charts. And our charts are interactive. So this is a Flourish chart I'm currently interacting within my screen, embedded in the camera presentation. You can, you know, visualize anything that you want. This is COVID vaccinations, add a filter, select different countries, switch it, and like literally engage with your data in real time and allow your user to explore your data as well, which is incredibly powerful as a communication tool. Our charts are also, they also range from very basic charts like a line chart, or a complex Sankey that visualizes flow and the change of states between stages. So in this case, we're visualizing the flip or the switch of state of seats in a political election. So we're saying moderates here in the first side of the screen, that is the initial state in the election. And then by the end of that electoral cycle, actually they lost a seat to the radicals or the Green Party. You're able to filter this data and only focusing on specific theories. And again, these are much more complex visualizations than maybe the typical line chart or bar chart or pie chart that you are more used to. And this just opens the door for much more complex storytelling and to visualize very complex data as well. We harness the power of animation. Our charts are very famous for having really good animation features, such as this racing bar chart. This engages with the audience incredibly, like people really respond to this sort of charts because they're just very friendly to look at, but also quite engaging. Like they immediately cause curiosity and people are just drawn to them and want to explore them further. We also have a really wide host of maps, which allow you to tell geographically driven stories. So in this case, you can visualize, you know, electoral results by county. Again, in the specific case of the US, you're able to zoom in and really drill into the insights of your data and just go really deep at it, and also give your users and your audience a chance to explore the data even further. We work with really high technology and enhance the performance of our charts, meaning that we are trying to give our users the best experience as possible. And this is a chart type that we're currently working with to visualize connections in the world. And we're using quite advanced technology to make sure that all these are rendering quite smoothly and fast, but this applies to any and every chart that we have within Flourish. We're constantly maintaining them and making sure that they're at the best level. So anybody who interacts and deals with our tool has a very smooth experience. And the great thing is that whenever you create a Flourish visualization, you can quickly share it, because when you export it and publish it, you will get a public link that people can access and view your charts, but you can also embed them into your website or a CMS, any blog, any portfolio that you have, and people are going to be able to see your creations quite easily. And you can also quickly embed your charts into Canva, which is a really huge asset. You are able to create social media assets that are data-driven, or create presentations that are interactive. While you're engaging with your audience, while you're delivering a presentation, you're able to also interact with your charts in real time. And I will be showing you how you can embed your own Flourish charts into Canva in a second. And now that you have like a taste and a flavor of what Flourish is, I'm just going to be sharing a couple of resources on how you can get started. So you can use it on your free time, you can use it for your own projects. And first we have our help docs. So the help docs are little how-to articles that will enable you to create anything that you want with Flourish. If you have a question on how to achieve a specific result, this is where you will find it. And if you do go down the route of chart making and data visualization, that is where a lot of the resources are. We also have our very own blog, where we share different information on theory of data visualization, but we also seek to inspire people to create their own charts. We share customer examples so you can see what our customers are building with Flourish. Again, projects, we've visualized anything and everything from the housing crisis to Wimbledon. And this is just to show what you can do with the tool and inspire you and enable you to create beautiful charts as well. We have our webinar series. So every month we have an hour session where we engage with our audience, and basically we cover different topics, and again, give you tools on how you can cover them as well using data visualization. And we do have an upcoming one on November 8th about visualizing football data ahead of the World Cup, because sports are very data driven. So I'll encourage you to visit that if you're interested. And all of our sessions are recorded, so you're able to watch this on your spare time if you ever want to dive deeper into the tool. Recently, I delivered the one about elections, which is quite relevant to this topic, so you're able to access that here. And you have links to all this in this presentation, and I will share this later when I'm done. And you also have the examples, which again will enable you and inspire you to create visualizations with Flourish as well. These are all Flourish powered, so anything and everything you see here, you could potentially do yourself with the tool. And I'll go over this very quickly. I just gather a couple of articles from our website that can help you get started with Flourish, and like once the session is over. So you have links to how to create a visualization, some data sources in case you don't have data yourself. We've listed a lot of different websites, NGOs, government websites, statistical departments, random sites for good data sources that you can use in your projects, how to use the right chart for your data, which is crucial when communicating, making sure that the data type matches the output. So what you're trying to communicate actually is communicating in the right format, how to create compelling visualizations. So going the next level with your charts, sharing your visualizations, making sure you have them in the right format, and visual vocabulary, which is a wonderful resource if you're getting started to understand how charts work and which type of charts you should use for specific use case. So if you're seeking to visualize change over time, for example, this will give you a list of the different chart types that you could potentially use to map your data. And it's overall a great resource by the Financial Times, and I'd highly recommend you check it out if you're interested in data visualization even further. Okay, so that's been quite a lot. And I'm just going to go over, before I go over the examples rather, I wonder if anybody has any questions up to this point.
No question.
All good?
Mafe.
Grand. So I'll just carry on and show you a couple of examples for political data rather, that's been visualized. So the first things, obviously redirecting to our blog, is that we have, 6 blogs specifically covering how to visualize elections. And one of them is in Spanish. Actually, it's our only blog in Spanish. And this is a list of the different chart types within Flourish that you can use if you ever wanted to visualize electoral data. So in this particular case, we have our parliament chart that obviously visualizes the distribution of seats within a parliament. You can compare different years but you can also compare different bodies of government. So you could do, for instance, the Senate or the Parliament if a specific country that you're visualizing has that type of system. We have the specific electoral bar. So this compares the number of seats per party, and you're able to toggle the legend off to create coalitions, or like to simulate what would it need for a specific party or specific group of parties to win an election. And this can be very handy in multi-party systems, of course. We also have a menu here, so you're able to select within different countries or bodies of government or years. It all depends on your data. Obviously, maps. Maps are huge whenever visualizing political data, because you can color regions either by share of votes or by specific party. So you're able to really convey a lot of information in a very small space. Packed circles allow you, this is a hierarchical type of chart, and it allows you to drill down into the data and just create big clusters and smaller clusters within. So in this case, we are taking a look at the European Parliament of 2014 by party, but then we are visualizing the share of that party per country. And you can click on it and really drill down and see how each country is also subdivided within those groups. A normal bar chart can also help you visualize electoral or political data. Racing bar chart, racing line chart as well. Survey, a survey allows you to visualize, yes, survey data, but it can also be other types of data. And in this case, every dot would be an answer in a survey. In this case, is a member of the 116th US Congress. And you'd be able to, for instance, group them by gender. So I'm going to split them by male and female, shade them by state or race, for instance. And I can see that the majority are men, and I guess this would be white and Hispanic. Yep. And I can just see like a nice overview of who is making up the Congress in the US, for instance. Size them by Clinton vote, perhaps, and I can take a look at how many voted for Clinton versus Trump, so on and so forth. And a good old trusty table. So this is a really good overview of all the things you can do for elections in Flourish. Most recently, and this is the article that Carmen was mentioning, I worked on this piece. And here I just focused on actual metrics or proper data that you can visualize in elections. So rather than focusing on the type of chart that you could do, I wanted to focus on the type of data you may want to visualize. So polling, voting intention and polling data. So we're focusing here. This was ahead of the first round in the Brazil elections. So what were the polls saying? Who were they casting as their winner? And you can also visualize this over time as a racing chart. If you wanted to see whether at one point or another, you know, when did Lula and Bolsonaro came really close, or was always Lula the forecasted winner? What happened to other parties? Like what was going on? And again, this is something that really engages with users and audience, and people generally respond very well to racing charts when they're quite short and quite simple. But then we also have the results. As I said, you can visualize this in a map and then add rich pop-ups, and we're able to see the winner of a specific state from a specific party, but then see the share of votes. So how many of them actually voted Republican versus Democrat. I can also visualize the margin of victory, which is a similar view to the previous map, but here I'm focusing more on how divided a country was, right? Like I'm trying to see whether states voted fully Democrat or fully Republican, and I actually realized that the division wasn't that big. It's like a lot of states are on that gray area where their votes were very split. You can see here the 3rd district of Colorado had a very, you know, almost like a 50-50 split, 51-43, contrary to this district number 8 in California, who voted 100% Republican. This is a really good way if you wanted to visualize this, like the divide of a country and what are those views and how politically divided it is. And you can do the exact same, show the exact same data in a very different way, which is through this arrow plot. So the direction of the arrow indicates whether votes went more into the middle, meaning like less people voted harshly for the party, so it became a more neutral state, or whether they moved Democrat or more Republican. And you can visualize any state that you want. More populous state, of course, will have more districts. You can get different trends. See how, for instance, this particular district moved heavily to a Republican after being more in the center, or how a couple of them moved to be more Democrat after being more in the center. And again, this is all just a really good ways of like showcasing trends in your data, and all those cells and numbers that would be quite meaningless and just very overwhelming at the very beginning suddenly become very easily understandable by a very broad audience. Again, seat distribution and coalition, I've already shown this. And again, if you access this blog, you will be able to see the recording of the webinar. So going back here. Yep. Grand, I also did some charts following some data that Carmen shared with me. So this is from the World Values Wave, and Carmen, correct me if I'm wrong, have you shared this data with them before? Like, have they seen this, or did you share it with me? Carmen?
Yeah, I didn't notice that was that data. Yeah, good.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Grand.
Yes, I didn't know that it was divided by states.
You can, yeah. So just for context, so Carmen shared a very, very wide data set with me. It was honestly massive, and I didn't have the time to wrangle it or do anything with it ahead of the session.
With this data in our exercise for the lab. However, we are, or I am mostly an Excel user, so
yeah, no, I mean, it was a massive data set. Yeah, it was bizarre. But the point I wanted to bring across with this is that she shared this data with me, and it was a very, very broad data set about values and how people were feeling about different things in the world. And it carried everything from like happiness to like whether they thought voting was fair, or like whether their votes were being counted fairly. And again, the power of visualization and the power of like wrangling your data is that you're able to really separate all those little bits and condense information in a very simplified way. So I thought of things that might be interesting to like visualize, or things that people might be curious to know. And I wanted to focus in the US again ahead of the electoral cycle. And I thought, everybody speaks about how divided the US is, and how some states are like red states and blue states, and just like, again, how politically divided it is. And I wanted to see if that was actually true. Like, I wanted to see whether the states themselves considered themselves that divided. And this visualization, which is just a heat map, takes data from each of the states and the respondents. And they were asked whether they felt they, saw themselves as left or right aligned politically. And I found it was
how the middle is very different for different states.
Yeah,
remarkable.
Exactly. So the lower they rank themselves, so if they rank themselves 1, it meant that they were left aligned. And if they ranked themselves right, it meant that they were 10, it meant that they were right aligned. So the lower the percentage, the more to the left they are. And one thing that really startled me was that most of them actually align in the middle. So, that means that they consider themselves to be kind of like neutral, or at least like flippable. They are not hard left or hard right. You can definitely tell that people don't really identify themselves as left wing, and most of them do as right wing. And again, a very, very quick exercise, but just to kind of like, you get a pulse of how a full country is feeling, and like what their political views are, at least on paper, at least what they share in this survey. And I thought that it was like, again, quite interesting, and also to see how right lenient it is, given the current political scenario and like the ambience. So yeah, that's one of the insights I wanted to share with you, and also like how you can transform data by asking the right questions and just like having a clear understanding of what you're trying to tell to your audience. And another chart that I built was this sort of like how to explain it. It's kind of like even like a sentiment chart. This was about what was it? If I remember this correctly, I think it was the same data. I think I was visualizing exactly the same trying to understand, but trying to understand how they saw themselves in color. So like, what is this thing in which people identify again themselves as like left to right? And again, you get like this sense that there's a really gray area in the middle where people don't feel politically inclined to anything, but then there's a huge sea of red here, signaling that you have a lot of states that are just more right-leaning, that they feel comfortable with identifying themselves as being left-leaning, for instance, or more Democrat, right? And you also get your really blue states.
Red is for right here as our Republican, the red
Yeah.
Republicans. Okay.
Yeah. So you can see how you have like a very strong wall of red, right? It's like a lot of states just identifying themselves as like right lenient, and not that many being like harsh blue or like left lenient, which again is always interesting to understand, and more interesting looking at the current politics and how they're ahead of the midterms, and how, you know, maybe the right is making a comeback, or like the old right could be something potentially influential in like coming elections and stuff. So again, just data visualization is a communication tool, and it can help you bring insights across to different audiences, to broader audiences. If I had just told you, oh, it seems like the US is very right lenient and not really that left lenient, you may have not been given like a strong impression of the data, but maybe seeing this causes like an impact to you, and it leads you to like think different about the problem or think different about a specific situation. And it's just really like the power of visualization and like the entry point of what data can do for you. But that's all I had to say for now, and we are going on with the workshop. So I don't know, Carmen, how you want to carry on with this. Like, I was thinking of just going over the steps. All that you guys need is your Flourish account, which you should have set up by now, and you can go to this URL to access the data.
Yeah, well, we usually work in groups, divided in groups. So we are having here 6 different groups. I think we are already prepared with the account, the Flourish account. So I think we are ready. See?
Good. Can you just let me know when you have access to the data so I can go into my other screen and like actual demo the charts?
Which the data that you mean?
Yeah. So when everybody has access this link and they have the data set, just let me know so I can carry on.
Okay. Okay. Do you need to move to in groups? Huh? Let me show you the other half of the class, Mafe.
Thanks.
Okay, are you ready? Are you having this data?
Oh, sí, ya estamos en.
All good?
Nos vamos a meter en ese. Vale. Sí, estamos en Flourish, pero el data, ¿dónde está? No sé cómo.
El link que ella puso.
Hay que darle create new.
Yeah, thank you, Mafe.
No worries. Yeah.
Use this URL.
Yeah. So this should lead you to a Google Sheets. So that's all you need to do.
Sí. Ready?
Es que
Hey, I think we are ready, Mafe.
Okay, grand. So you should all be seeing something like exactly like this. So this is the data we're going to be working with today. On the second tab source, you will find the source where I got this from, which is YouGov. And this is polling data for voting intention in the UK. So our column A has specific date. So I think these are coming into roughly weekly periods. And then we have one column per each of the main parties in the UK, and the value is a percentage. So for instance, I can read here that on the week of January the 26th, 2020, the Conservative Party had 49% of voting intention, meaning that 49% of respondents were willing to vote for the Conservative Party on a general election. So of course, we all know that polling works for us to be able to predict or at least read sentiment and know whether one political party is ahead in the races or how are people feeling about each political party over time. As you may have heard in the news or read in the news, a lot has been going on in UK politics currently. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of like take this to be a quite timely topic and visualize this data. So I'm going to be guiding you through the steps of creating a line chart to visualize all of this data. We're going to do this together. So the first thing we need to do, if you have not done so, go into Flourish. And again, if you haven't done so, you need to sign in to your account. And once you do this, once you hit sign in, you're going to be led into this sort of view, which is your projects view. Yours might be empty because you have no charts. I have a lot of folders and charts in here, but this is where all the projects that you create with Flourish are going to live. You can add them into different folders. You cannot create subfolders. So if you're trying to have one folder within another, that's not going to work. But I have my little Snap folder in here, and I'm just going to create a new visualization, and all you need to do is hit the button right there. So once you do that, you're going to be brought into our template chooser. This is this view page where you're going to see all the starting points that are available on Flourish. So all these charts are pre-populated, and you're able to click on one, and then you will get a duplicate of that chart, and you will be able to start plotting. So before I mentioned that it's really important for you to understand when to use each chart for your data, this is where it all comes to matter, right? Because when you understand what you're trying to tell, then you're able to select the correct starting point to actually visualize your data. In this case, we're going to be using the line chart. So you would go to this first section here, line bar pie, and you would click on line chart. So far, so good. Everybody's here. Quickly, I don't want to go too fast if anybody's behind. So stop me at any time if anybody has any questions or if somebody's lagging behind, perhaps. So as I said also in my presentation, all Flourish charts are pre-populated, meaning that whenever you click on one of those starting points, you're always going to get a starting chart. And this is for our users to know how the template works and how the charts should roughly look like. You have two tabs, the preview and the data tab. The preview tab is your chart. This is where you're going to make the design decisions. You're going to change colors, add a heading, title, subtitle, make all the aesthetic choices. And then the data is where you're going to actually tell Flourish how to interpret your data and how to create the charts. As I said, all of our charts come with data. And once again, this is to help you understand how your data needs to be formatted when you input it. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clear this. And you need to hit the little arrow under the data tab right here and hit clear sheet. And this is going to give us a clean slate. And you can see here that I don't have anything, nothing is showing on my preview tab because I don't have any data. So I can't have a chart, which is very handy. So now we need to all go to the data sheet that I shared with you, and we need to select all of our data by hitting Command A if you're in a Mac or Control A if you're in Windows, and Command C or Control C to copy it. And we need to go to Flourish, right click, and right click. You simply need to do Command V. So a normal copy paste situation. Everybody got it? So far?
Can you please repeat that part?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, okay, if you have data, so Flourish is not exactly like Excel or Google Sheet, but you are able to do some similar commands. So if you do Command A or Control A, you will select everything in your data tab. And if you do, for instance, delete, you will delete the data. If you want to delete the data, you can clear your sheet right here. This is so we make sure that we have a clean slate. And then you need to go to the data that I just shared with you, and you select it all. And you do that by doing Command A. Command A is going to grab all the cells that have data in them. And this is to the contrary of just like dragging your mouse over it. You can do copy or Command C. And then you need to go to Flourish again. Place yourself on cell 1A. And then do Command V or Control V if you're in a Windows. And that should pull all your data.
Same for Excel than for Google Forms.
Exactly. You're also able to upload your data. So say, for instance, that you had a local CSV file or a local Excel file, you can simply click upload data and it would browse through your data files and you would just import it into Flourish. Okay, so very quickly, we can already see that something is happening here. And now the way Flourish works is once you have data on your data tab, you have the column bindings. Column bindings are these little cells that we have here to the right side of the screen. And each column binding, each binding is telling the chart what it should do or how it should behave. So if we remove all bindings, we don't have a chart because we are not telling the template what to do, right? It's like we're not giving any instructions. So first instruction that we need to give it is what are our labels or what is our time series? Because line charts are used to represent time data. So generally, you have an x-axis, which is your horizontal axis, showcasing dates, so years, months, dates, hours. And then you have a line that traces through time, and it goes up or down depending on your data, and you get an overview of how a metric performed over time. So I need to give that information to my template. So where are my labels? Where's my time information? That's on column A. So I just need to type column A. Now, values. I am able to give this template multiple values, but I'll just start with one. I want to map the conservatives. How have the conservatives performed over time? They live in column B, so I just need to type here column B. And if I go to preview, I will get a line going again across time. And in this case, we have a sharp decrease. Very quickly, this is telling us that the Conservative Party popularity has been decreasing over time. That's it. That's a very simple conclusion you can get from this particular chart. If I go back into my data tab, I can say, well, I don't care about the Conservatives, I care about Labor. What is the Labor Party doing? And just do C, go back. Oh, Labor's popularity is actually increasing. That's very interesting, right? I'm starting to get like insights from my data. I'm starting to understand what's going on. But now the thing is that I don't want to see just Conservatives or just Labor. I want to see them together. So to visualize or to grab multiple columns together, you can do either a comma. So a comma will select columns separately. And I can see that here. Conservatives are the dark purple line and Labor is the lighter purple line. And we can see how Conservatives started having a higher popularity than Labor. Eventually they crossed over. Then Labor again lose popularity. Conservatives win in popularity. And then most recently, you can see how Labor just like skyrockets. And then the Conservatives are losing popularity quite heavily. And recently maybe upticking it a little bit. So far, so good, everybody? Okay. Now, I don't care about just the Conservatives of Labor. I want to see everything. I want to see all the political spectrum in the UK. So to do that, I'm going to select arrange. So I told you that if I did commas, I would select single columns. So if I do, for instance, B for conservative and then E for the Scottish National Party, I'm only selecting those two. And this is what I get. But if I do a range, meaning I want everything from start to finish, from column B to column I, all I need to do is do B hyphen I. And this will give me all my parties in a single chart. Up to this point, does everybody, every group have a line chart that looks something like this?
Yes. Yes.
Grand. Okay, so again, all good? Okay. So again, let's go over this very quickly. I have every line represents a political party in the UK, and I'm just seeing how they perform over time in terms of popularity. I can see if I click on this legend right here, I'm going to be hiding parties. This is fully interactive. You can always bring them back if you click them back into the chart. But a few conclusions I can take is that obviously Conservatives and Labour take most of the votes in any general election, and that makes a lot of sense because those are the majority parties in our parliament. All other smaller parties are more important in like regional elections. So Scotland usually votes for the SNP. In Wales they vote for Plaid Cymru and stuff like that. So again, if I just wanted to drill down into a specific one, my axis also updates, and I can just see, for instance, the performance of one political party if I wanted to. Again, fully interactive chart that you can engage with. Now, this is all grand. Now we need to take a couple of steps to make sure that this chart is actually accurate and correct. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add a header. You can add whatever you want, but I'm going to lead with Labour leads the polls because that is exactly what I'm seeing. But I will take a look at this, which is a small increase of the Conservatives, and say, but Conservatives, Conservative are picking up momentum rather. There we go. And all I did was in my settings panel, which is this right-hand side of my screen, I went to the header section, and here I can add title, subtitle, even some text if I wanted to. I can place it to the center, to the left, to the right. If you take on styling options, you get more information. You can change the the font of your title if you wanted to some of these options that we offer, color, etc. You're able to style this as you want. You can make it smaller or slightly bigger and just edit your chart elements. Now, adding a heading to your chart is incredibly important because if people see the chart isolated on the internet, or if they see it just like in a glimpse, the heading is going to be the first thing that's going to give them a clue as to what they're seeing, right? So it's important that your headers are generally sharing the most important insight of your chart. In this case, that Labour is leading the polls. Now I'm going to add a footer, which is going to be the source. So I'm always going to be quoting where I got my data from. This is, again, going back into that reliability, source, trustworthiness. We need to make sure that we tell our audience where we got our data from. I'm going to go back into my Google Sheets, and I'm just going to copy this URL back into Flourish. And this is YouGov and URL. So now anytime anybody sees this chart and they click on the link, they will be taken to the source I got my data from. And this is something we really encourage at Flourish, to make sure that you always link back to your sources. Everybody got a title and a footer set up?
Excuse me, can you just repeat
Yeah.
about the URL?
Oh yeah,
from the
absolutely.
document, thank you.
You're fine. So if you go to the data that I shared, the second sheet is the source. So you can simply copy the URL.
From the data. Thank you.
Yeah, fine, no worries.
presentation is being recorded, so you can consult it later on.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, it's like the source bit, it's just for good practice and to always encourage you guys to add sources to your charts, make sure that you always link back to them. But I mean, it's not the end of the world if you don't add the source to this particular chart. We know it's well sourced, no worries. I'll just give everybody a moment and then I'll carry on.
Questions?
Okay.
Is this application completely free for always, or?
Yes, so you have no limits as to how many charts you can make. You can make as many as you want, and you don't need to pay for the account. So we offer paid plans for newsrooms, publishers, and enterprise. So people who are, like dealing with using visualization in like bigger organizations, and they need a lot of seats and they need to access like complicated workflows. But if you're a single user and you just want to make visualizations, you're able to have your account for free always. A few things, for instance, you will get a watermark on your chart that says that it's a Flourish chart, and that always links back to us. It's our way to kind of like promote the brand, of course. There are some chart types that are private. They're only for premium customers, but the wide variety of charts, it's available for free for our users. But you're not going to be charged at any point, like as a cap or anything. You're able to have a free account forever and ever.
Thank you, Mafe. It has been a brilliant presentation, and I think that very useful. What about this animated charts that shows trends or shows a historical process or a period of time, the evolution, the let's say anything, the evolution of polling or evolution of polarization in an animated gift?
Yeah, so that, for instance, would be, let me go back to my data, and that should be in elections. Let's see. I think this is the one. You mean this one, right? Yeah. So this is a racing line chart race. And so if I go to App Flourish Studio, new visualization, you would find that right here in line chart race. So again, starting points, you can choose whichever you want. I'll go for simple. Again, it's going to be pre-populated. You'll have your data. And this chart type, it's very similar to the one that we just built, in that you have a time series and then you have every line is a series. But the difference is that you need to have your data on as your column header. So you would need to flip your data, transpose it, so to speak. So if I were to grab, and I can try and do this now, but I'm not sure if it's going to work, so bear with me. If I call this party, I grab this. Okay, if I bait this in here, let's see, and I transpose it. Okay, that's grand. A, and this goes for easy. Huh, it did work, look at that. Sometimes these things don't work live, so I'm actually quite surprised. So what I did there, and I can go over those steps very quickly, is I grab my data. Let me just make this very quick so we can see an animation. There we go. So I grab the exact same data that we visualized statically, and I just had to do a very, very small tweak. Like I need to wrangle it specifically, and then I'm able to get this animated view showcasing the evolution over time. So I'm aware that we are really out of time, so I'm able to show that again if you want, but I can also like share resources on how to do this, or maybe steps, or do we have extra time for going over this?
Well, we are supposed to have a break, but I think we can stay. No one is asking for the break, so they are really interested. So,
I mean, feel free to take the break. Okay,
Oh, no,
grand.
let's continue.
So
ahead.
I'll just go over this very, very quickly. Again, I'll delete this and go over those steps. So to create a racing bar chart, line chart, sorry. Again, we go to the line chart race starting point. Simple. I will clear my data so I don't have any information right here. And now I'm going to be using the exact same data that I use for the line chart, but there's a catch. And it is that if I do this, this is not going to work. So I'm not going to get any charts. This is not working because this chart type needs to have the dates as column headers. So luckily, Flourish allows for some level of wrangling, which means we can manipulate the data in some ways. And in this case, all we need to do is click on this little button on the corner that says swap rows and columns. And this is going to pivot my data. So everything that's in column A, which is my column party, is suddenly going to become my column headers. And all the data that I have for each of my columns is going to go into a row. So now every row is going to be a party instead of every column being a party. And this template actually has something that we call data magic, which is a new feature within Flourish. And it automatically detects my data and selects the right columns to build the chart. So I won't go into much detail because that's going to be unnecessarily complicated, but it might be a bit different from what you experience with the line chart, sorry. So again, if I go to preview, I am left with this chart. And the first thing that I'm going to do, because as you can see, it's very, very slow. I'm just going to go to animation, right? And animation duration is how long the charts should play for, right? And this is in milliseconds. So 1500 milliseconds is roughly what, 15 seconds. So I'm just going to set this to be, say, 100. And this is going to be very, very quick. And it will end soon. There we go. In this template, you're able to see ranks. So maybe you don't want to see actually how popular were they in terms of percentage. Maybe you just want to see whether it was Labor or Conservative or Lib Dem or any party over time. Then in that case, you can switch to ranks, but I'm going to leave it to be scores. More things we can do. We can edit how this chart looks by going into line styles. And for instance, I can decrease the line width. These are a bit thick to my taste, so I'm going to make them a bit thinner, maybe 0.1. That's a bit too thin, so 0.2. I don't want to have a shading behind the line, which is that shade right there. Turn it off. And the circles, I'm going to make them just smaller. Start radius is the start of my line here. Just going to make it 0. And the end radius is this one right here. I'm just going to make it 0.1. 0.4 and stroke 0, something like that. I want to change the axis so it's a bit more readable because this really, it's not that well understood. And for that, I'm just going to go to styling, make it 0, make it 90, so it's a bit more readable, and make it a tad smaller. And these are all just like tweaks that you can apply to your chart to match a specific style that you want, or to follow any guidelines if you are giving those. More things I can do, I can add a percentage to my axis title, for instance, voting intention %. So everybody knows what they're looking at and what the data that I'm showing is. And most importantly, I can also change the colors of my chart to match anything I want. So within Flourish, colors are fully editable. You always get a palette. If you go to your color section, palette, you can open the dropdown and you can move these things around. So for instance, conservatives can be in this shade of like teal. If I move it, yeah, in the shade of teal. Labor can be yellow, for instance. Whatever, I can click on this, change the colors as I want. And again, giving you a lot of customization options, but you're also able to code your own colors in here. And for that, I'm going to go back into the presentation, and you're also able to do this once I share the presentation with you. but you're able to do what we call color overrides, which is, oh gosh, where are you? Oh, there you are. Which is you're able to tell Flourish how you want to color each of the series based on specific values. So in this case, I'm doing conservatives and labor. There we go. So now these are matching the actual color of the party, like in different polling stations, or like the color that matches their brand. And it just looks way better overall, like much more sleek, and people can actually like attach some meaning to the colors of the chart. And again, I'm just going to add a quick header here. So labor leads the polls. Nice. And for the footer, I'll just get rid of this and say, you go. And when I'm done, and I think this is pretty much ready, all you need to do to share your graphics or, export them, publish them wherever, give it a title. So this is UK Racing Poll. Export and publish to share and embed. It's going to ask you whether you want to allow anybody to duplicate this project with data. So Flourish charts have private data. If you share a project and you don't tick that box, people can see the project, but they cannot access the data behind it, and that is to protect our users. But if you're fine, and if you want to share your data with anybody, if they want to duplicate it and see it, then you would hit and click this little box right here. I'm happy with that, so I'm just going to hit publish. And then I'm going to be given two things, a link, and this link leads me to the public page of my chart. So you can share this with anybody, you can paste this on Twitter, you can paste this wherever you want, and people are going to access this specific page. And if you've selected the option to duplicate and edit, people are going to be able to duplicate your chart and edit it on their own end. Your original chart is going to remain unchanged, but they will have a copy of it. And again, you can share this with lecturers, friends, anybody you want to show your chart with. Or you can embed your chart into a website, a blog, a CMS with this embed code right here. And this is an interactive and a responsive embed. So it will adapt to mobile screens, it will adapt to like smaller screens, iPads, different orientations, etc. And it's the embedding option that we recommend the most. Now, you're able to bring this to Canva natively by going to any Canva asset or presentation that you want. And if you have a Flourish account, you should go to Elements, to the More section, type Flourish, and you will be given the Flourish widget. So this is going to connect. It might ask you to log in. It doesn't ask me to log in because I'm already hooked up with the system. But once you log in, it means that you are able to see your Flourish charts in this side panel right here, and you're able to simply click on a chart and it will populate your Canva presentation. And this is fully live in that any changes that I make to my chart are going to be immediately reflected here. So if I go back to my racing chart and I change something, say for instance, the background. If I remove the background and republish, and I go back to my Canva presentation, it removed the color that I had, right? That's not really that readable, so let's do a quick change here, color. And for instance, let's just do something like this. Okay, so I just changed the color of my conservative party line, republished it, went back into Canva, and I can see that the change has been reflected. I have my background back and my chart. And I can resize it as I want. It can be more on the vertical side of things. And I can add a new title, perhaps. So again.
Also, can you export it as a video from Canva also?
Yeah, so that is one thing that our users have been asking for ages. We don't support video experts yet. So the best way, if you wanted to share this as a video, as a GIF or an MP4, it would be to record your screen. So if you have a Mac, Shift Command 5, and that will give you like the possibility to record your screen, and then you can export that. But all other charts, if they're static, you can export them as a PNG or even an SVG, and you're able to, share that as an image. But for videos, we currently don't support that. We're in the works of getting something worked up for customers though. And then again, if I want to replay it, I'll just click replay and it'll go back again. Okay, so I believe that was like a very overwhelming demo. So I'm more than happy to stick around if anybody has any questions about the demo, about Flourish as a tool, or about data journalism or data visualization. I hope everybody got to a point where they are happy with their charts, and please keep playing with them, keep customizing them, adding your own elements to it. And yeah, I hope you found it useful. And yeah, I'm able to stick around for a few questions, so happy to answer any if you have any.
Okay, we have a couple of questions here.
This is more a technical question. How do you find the codes of the colors?
Oh yeah, so I mean, I have them here in the presentation because I obviously prepped for the demo, so I knew I needed them. But you mean how I actually found them, or how I make the codes, if that makes sense?
I don't even know how to like find them or use them, so either works.
Yeah. Okay. This is a weird question in that I don't even know how to explain this myself. But basically, okay, Flourish works with either hex codes or RGB codes for color. So if you don't want to, for instance, indicate to your template or your tool your color in this way, you would be able to simply edit your color palette and say, change it here, and you can get the codes here as well if you click. So this is the hex code, for instance. If I were to change, okay, so say I want to change the color for labor, right? I have a different hex code and I want to make it this weird orange. I can simply go here, select the color that I like, go to hex, copy, go back and change labor. Oh gosh, that didn't work. Well, I'll memorize this very quickly. FF8838. Okay. FF8888 or 8838. Ah, that worked. And that changed the color. Does that answer the question or not at all?
See, that.
Yeah.
What about those milestones or those inflection point that you have in the other screen?
Yes. So all like Flourish charts have different possibilities and functionalities. So this chart type doesn't allow me to do highlights, but this one does. So if I quickly go back to my presentation and I make a couple of swift changes, bear with me for a sec. Colors, change this. Again, con and light. This line 1.5 opacity. Okay, grand. And straight. Okay, so now I have my chart, and as Carmen said, it's like there are moments where things have happened that have influenced the opinion of people in the polls, and I want to reflect that. So for that, I'm able to add annotations, and we call them axis highlights because you are adding highlights to points in time. So in this case, I want to highlight when something happened on a specific date. So I need to go to my x-axis and then follow this syntax. So for anything that I want to highlight, I need to give it a label or just some sort of information. I'm going to call this, whatever, event X, 2 columns, and then I need to give it the date where it happened. So let's pretend something happened on October the 10th, 2021.
Okay.
I would get that added to that specific point in time. Again, in my presentation, I have my little script sheet. So I will copy all of this, bring it back into my chart, paste all of that. And here are some things that I wanted to highlight. Line width 1-0 and 222. Let's make them smaller. and a bit larger. Okay. So you can see that a lot of things happen here, but I highlighted the first lockdown of COVID, so you can see how conservatives increased their popularity during that time. Then the UK leaves the EU. In that moment, Labour actually increased popularity, and that makes sense because obviously conservatives were powering or facilitating Brexit in that time. Then Omicron was detected, and then there were like a lot of complaints about how the government was dealing with lockdown. So it makes a lot of sense that the opposition party gained popularity. Russia invades Ukraine, Labour kept still going at the polls. Johnson resigns. At this point, yes, Labour were pretty much on top of polls. Then the pound drops significantly, and you can see how that created a huge momentum for the Labour Party, obviously because everybody was hating on the Conservatives for their poor management of economics. And here, these two are super clustered together, but basically one is the resignation of Liz Truss, which was the former prime minister, and the appointment of Rishi Sunak, which is the new prime minister. And you can see it happened between a week. If I take off Liz Truss and I only focus on Rishi Sunak, you can actually see how there's a quick spike in conservative momentum. Like there's a bit more support after Sunak became elected, which is interesting because then we can see, or we can even forecast, if I were a political analyst and I was working on something much more in-depth and had more data, that, you know, depending on his economic handling of the situation in the UK, perhaps he's going to actually fix the Conservative Party in terms of popularity. And maybe by the time we have a general election, this gap is going to be much, much closer because of these moments in time and because of these little actions that have happened. So if I were to, for instance, keep updating this chart, I would look into what political actions are being taken, right? It's like we're about to announce a new budget, we're about to announce tax cuts or other measures. So I would take a look at that, or take a look at how other events are impacting opinion polls and see how it evolves. And then by the time we do have an election, you know, who knows, maybe I have a really good prediction of who's going to be the winner of that electoral cycle, and all through analyzing and showing my data. So yeah, thanks for bringing that across, Carmen. That's a really good point. Any more questions?
Any more questions? No. Okay, that was great, Mafe. Thank you very much. We have I am not accepting more plain graphics from today to the end of the course. Okay, so be aware. Mafe, it's also seems to be very friendly, very easy to use, the platform, and that's a marvelous thing when you have a fight against SPSS, for instance. I don't know if you have worked with SPSS, but it's a real pain. SPSS gives us the opportunity to work with stats. It also Flourish, having graphics for correlations or things like that, for models.
So well, one thing is that Flourish is not a BI tool, so we're not competing with like Tableau or Power BI, in that we don't have the capacity to actually do analysis. So we require from people to come in with the data in a format that they already know how to visualize. You are able to input your data and, like, for instance, you know, do a couple of things here and there to see how it looks, but you're not able to actually do advanced calculations or like actual modeling within the tool. If you have data and you have it cleaned up and you are super sure about what you're trying to show, you're super able to create like scatter plots to show correlation. So gosh, do I have a good example of that? Yeah, I think so. So if I go to, yeah, so Wimbledon was a good example. We were working on this, and I mean, this is a scatter plot showing the correlation of like the points of players in Wimbledon and how many games they won. So whether, if you're highly ranked, you know, have you won more games, or how it works. And, you know, Flourish allows you to actually plot this data. You get your trend lines, which for statistical analysis is very important. You can also single out specific elements and color them. We color them as like tennis balls to create like this association of the concept, but it won't give you the analysis. We are able to interpret this because we knew the data, we worked with it, we are fairly knowledgeable on these things, but Flourish is not going to spit out a summary statistically saying this, that, this is your mean, this is your curve, this is your average, or your mode or anything like that. You need to provide that to the tool itself, but you're able to do this. Or again, we did like trend lines with line charts and just like different stylistically options. This is a dot plot showcasing gender pay gap. So the wider, like the more separate the bubbles are, the wider the pay gap in price money. And you can see how it basically reached parity since the late 80s, which is quite good. And yeah, so Flourish gives you the tools to visualize that, but it won't give you the tools to actually analyze it, if that makes sense.
Okay. More questions? No? No? Well, thank you very much, Mafe. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you so much for having me. And again, you can follow me on Twitter or DM me over there if you ever have any questions. More than happy to answer them. That's also my email if you want to reach out. And again, fairly open to answer any questions if you have them about data visualization in general or what we do at Flourish. And yeah, thank you, Carmen, for the opportunity. It's always nice to go back to UNAF. Thank you so much. Good.
Thank you, Mafe.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
No, thank you. Bye-bye.